Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about a rather simple topic. However, it's very easy to go deep on. What I'm referring to is personality traits. In this video, I'll be going over 10 of the most important positive and negative personality traits in my opinion. I'll be going over what they are and why I think they are important, and how to develop the positive ones and lose the negative ones. This video ended up being way longer than all my other ones so far, but it's definitely worth your time. But without further ado, what is a personality trait? So, by definition, personality traits reflect how someone thinks, acts, and behaves in general. These need to be consistent in order to be considered a personality trait. And it doesn't mean, for example, that an extrovert will always be extroverted. It kind of works like a meter, where someone can be more or less extroverted. However, the main idea is that they are consistently extroverted in general. Some of these personality traits that immediately come to mind are kindness, loyalty, egotism, honesty, envious, and you get the general idea. Although I won't really touch much on this throughout the video, it's important to know that personality traits are characterized kind of like a scale, where they can be anywhere in between 2 points, this being openness to experience, where it's determined if someone is curious or more cautious. Consciousness being organized versus careless, extroversion being outgoing versus reserved, agreeableness being compassionate versus competitive, and finally, neuroticism being anxious versus calm. Before we get into the list, we first need to learn how someone actually develops a personality trait. Developing personality traits is a mix of our genetics, environment, and life experiences. First off, genetics. This one is fairly straightforward, but we can inherit some aspects of our parents' personality. This doesn't immediately mean we'll be an exact copy or even be similar to our parents at all. For environment, this one is mainly about our social life, namely our friends at school and whoever else we socialize with. But how we are raised, our family setting, and of course our culture will have massive influence on this too. And of course, life experiences. These being new experiences, challenges, stuff like finally moving to a new place or maybe experiencing a breakup. I'll have an effect on how we developed our personality traits. But of course, those three aren't the only things that develop personality traits. For example, our mental health will affect us. An experience that could have made someone a pessimist can have the opposite effect and make them hopeful for the future. And the other one being self reflection in general. Of course, as we can develop these personality traits, we can also lose them. However, this is more specific for each trait, and I'll be going on how to potentially lose the bad ones. But remember, I'm not an expert. Anyways, with that done, let's get into the positive traits. So, before we actually get into them, what defines a positive personality trait? Well, in my opinion, it is something that does or has one of the following. Something that develops personal growth and self reflection, such as someone who is honest. Something that can benefit others when you get no reward for it, such as integrity and being respectful. And finally, being able to synergize with other traits. For example, confidence and honesty are obviously two good traits, but they can lead to arrogance, making a person way too direct and not having much thought behind what they say. Of course, this doesn't mean these two are bad, but you probably get the idea. Anyways, with the definition set, let's get to the 10 traits I think everybody should have, in no particular order, why I think they are important and how we can try to develop them. First on our list, and one of my personal favorites, we got adaptability. No, not that one. Being adaptable means you can easily adapt to sudden changes, take on challenges, and adjust to new situations. This one is really good because adaptable people thrive in constantly changing environments. And if there's one thing I'm scared of, it is change. Anyways, they will always take a challenge head on without avoiding it, and will respond well to unexpected obstacles. Anyways, how can you develop this trait? Well, we can start by thinking of change as a new opportunity instead of some kind of threat. Being curious can also play a big factor in this, as you'll be more likely to explore tricky situations on your own. And maybe you can even take some small risks and challenge yourself. This is one of the traits I'm actively trying to fully develop since I find it so helpful and important. And just maybe I can avoid repeating the past. Moving on to the next trait, we got self-awareness. This one is really important for people to have. But why do I think that's the case? Being self-aware means having the ability to recognize, understand, and accept the truth of your feelings, emotions, and behaviors, whether it be past or present. But it isn't just understanding and accepting yourself, but also having consciousness on how your actions affect other people. And once you manage to develop a good sense of self-awareness, you'll find yourself much happier with yourself and the way you are. You will value others more, find yourself much more open to feedback, and have the ability to honestly take account for your actions. To develop self awareness, you need to firstly understand yourself, your emotions and state of mind. You then want to learn what your strengths and weaknesses are. After this, you'll be able to reflect on yourself. This can go from taking time to think about how you act, why you act, and behave like you do, and ultimately manage to improve yourself and fully becoming self aware. One tip I can give to help in this process is to journal something. It doesn't even have to be related to this development, but even just making a diary of some kind or having somewhere to store photos will help. Next on the list, we got honesty, which is the ability to tell people how you feel about situations, being sincere and not relying on any kind of lies. Of course, honest people do this softly, as they word what they want to tell you, in a way you can understand that you are not being attacked. Honest people aim to be trustworthy and someone people can rely on. Being honest is way harder than it looks. Many times with life we end up lying because a truth might be too hurtful. But to become someone who's honest ourselves, we first need to be truthful with ourselves. If we can't even do that, how can we be truthful to others? We need to avoid sugarcoating and be direct to the point, which in itself it's really hard. You probably went through something like this. You know, the truth hurts, and of course, surrounding yourself with honest people will eventually make you one of them. Now we've got charisma. I think this is the most important trait a leader can have, as charisma means being able to give people confidence, charm others with their energy, and at its core, giving people morale and make them feel needed and valued. Being able to be a beacon to others is awesome. Managing to uplift people and bringing them together. Developing charisma is somewhat tricky, as if you want to spread your positive energy and motivate people, you need to be someone social and extroverted. You have to show confidence and speak with enthusiasm while looking people in the eyes. We are halfway through our positive traits, and our fifth is being respectful. But this doesn't just mean we have to not bother others. Being respectful means treating people with kindness, consideration, and being fair to everyone. But it's still not just that. You need to understand the perspective of others and how they feel, even when you don't agree yourself. In itself, most people can't be truly respectful, either because of short temper, being a prideful individual, and so on and so on. To learn to be respectful, we first need to learn good manners and how to communicate with people correctly. We need to be open minded and understand why a person might disagree with you. And most importantly, we need to be patient. So, next up, we got hopefulness, which means always being positive and believing that the best outcome possible will happen, and even taking into account all odds. As we say, hope is the last to die. But why is hope so important? Well, simply because of how positively infectious a hopeless person can be. Being able to convince others and yourself that everything will be fine and to fight for the better future. They focus in the good in life and appreciate what they have. We can all aspire to be like them, and we can start by simply changing our mindset to always focus on the good instead of the bad, being resilient and having the strength to keep going despite everything looking dim and full of despair. And it's just not about believing, but also doing. Determination. The trait that no matter what will make a person keep going. By that description alone, it should already be pretty obvious why I put it on the list. But let's go a little bit further on what it actually is. Being determined is not only having strong willpower, but also self discipline and a lot of persistence. This means that even if they start to feel less motivated and start to facing difficulties, they'll still have the drive to keep pushing and keep fighting for their goals. Developing the determination starts from setting a clear and actual meaningful goal for ourselves that will give us that initial drive. After that, we need to strengthen our work ethic and build up resilience, always giving our best and not backing down at the sight of any obstacle. And of course, you should celebrate milestones towards your goal, which will keep you motivated. Next up, we have integrity, which is kind of like a step up from honesty, and not being just that, but also mixing good ethics. This means having no issue saying the truth and always doing what's right, even when there's nothing in for them. Even going as far as to make sacrifices, not taking any shortcuts in order to consistently do what's right. These people should be looked up to. And it's not hard to understand why it's such a good trait to develop. Of course, we need to first be honest, and we already explored why that in itself can be hard, but we also need to be consistent with our ethics and how we go about handling situations. Loyalty is something we all want in people we surround ourselves in, and it's even more important in romantic relationships. Most people tend to think loyalty is just sticking to a person and not betraying their trust, but there's way more to it people don't consider. To be loyal, you have to not only give all your trust to somebody, but to be able to fully commit. Be supportive and always helping and working to help someone grow. Have full faith in them, and most importantly, be consistent. What good will being loyal do if you suddenly stop or don't feel like you can do it anymore? You need to show that you can be relied on. To be loyal is as simple as giving your all into something, giving full support, being able to trust blindly, and of course, to be able to do this for however much time it's needed. And to finish our list of positive traits, we have the one that, in my opinion, is the most important trait of them all. And of course, I'm talking about empathy. This is about not only understanding how other people emotionally feel, but to be able to connect with them, take their perspective, being able to comfort them and show support. Surely you get it by now. Speaking about feelings is something that was, and probably will be, very hard to do. And having someone who can hear you out without fear of judgment or disappointment, having someone who can put themselves in your shoes and connect to how you feel, being empathetic is just a wonderful quality to have. But to be able to empathize with other people, we first need to empathize with ourselves. We won't be able to help others if we don't manage to help ourselves first. You need to show support. This can be asking questions, letting someone develop their ideas further, so you can see exactly how they mentally are and how they feel, and to best understand their perspective. You need to be patient. Understand that at their core, feelings are pretty silly, and sometimes our minds brings us to rock bottom for no reason. I think I made a really strong point for empathy and why it's so important. So please try your best to show it to others around you. Now that we are done talking about the traits that I think, in my opinion, are the best, which ones do I think are the worst? Of course, we need to start with the definition. Although it's pretty much just opposite of what a good trait is, I consider it negative if it harms other people or the person themselves, like egotism and solitude. If the trait is extreme, like perfectionism or impulsiveness, and if it stops a person from growing and bettering themselves, like stubbornness. So, now let's get into the 10 worst traits in my opinion, why I don't like them, and how to lose them. We are starting the negative traits by one that honestly kind of pisses me off, which is impulsiveness. This refers to people who act without logic and with no forethought. This is either because they let themselves get carried by their emotions, desires, or simply because they feel comfortable and convince themselves that they don't deserve to think about what they're doing. Like all traits in this list, it's self-destructive. You'll eventually face consequences and might end up driving people away because of what you do. This one is really easy to avoid. Just simply managing our emotions and taking a moment to breathe and think is enough to avoid making mistakes. Next up, we have pessimism. We probably all had our experiences with this one, either being from ourselves or in other people. Pessimism refers to always thinking about the worst outcome, not even caring to try and worrying too much. Even when people try to help them, they will be skeptical and probably end up driving them away. Sometimes these people don't want to be helped, which sucks because it's so hard to get someone out of that mindset. We could start by focusing on solutions to our problems, and not the problems themselves. This will give us an initial boost pessimists need, which is already a huge step in the right direction. We can start by taking these bad thoughts and looking at them differently from a new perspective, and simply surrounding ourselves with positive thoughts, and people can help. Next up, we got a really bad one. And I mean this as it can be so self-destructive to someone. This is, of course, insecurity, which is pretty simple by definition. When someone has doubts about their confidence, their abilities, their place in life, or their worth to others. This is usually because of self-doubts or a fear someone might have. Because of their insecurity, someone will avoid taking risks, not wanting to make their situation worse, have lots and lots of self-doubts. They'll be scared of being rejected, abandoned, forgotten, or that they just don't have worth in people's lives anymore, which will lead to a need for validation, where they feel like they need to be reassured from someone. And lastly, they'll be defensive when someone asks them about their condition or situation, assuring people they're fine when they really aren't. For this section, I spoke from experience. Making research on this video, I came to realize that back a couple months ago, I was extremely insecure. I've always been a pretty positive and confident person, so when this eventually happened to me, I didn't even entertain the idea of being insecure. I ended up isolating myself and literally doing nothing, which on the long term ended up doing more damage. Admittedly, it was my fault as I filled my head with some really bad thoughts and some other things. But can we overcome insecurity? First off, we need to build some sense of self-awareness and accept our condition, focusing on getting rid of negative thoughts and having hope and being positive for the future instead of being stuck in the present. We need to focus on our own personal growth. Doing all of this will eventually get rid of any insecurities you might have. But of course, one of the best ways to deal with this is just telling someone you trust. I'm sure they would be willing to help. Next up, we got perfectionism. And while at first it might seem that it's not bad to want to be perfect, since you'll be working hard and be determined to reach a goal, most of the time that goal is something we can't realistically achieve. And when we aren't able to do it, we will be critical of ourselves. We might overwork ourselves and burn out, and maybe something as simple as a drawing can feel like a giant obstacle. I've also had a slight bit of personal experience with this one. Back when I was younger, I used to make Minecraft servers for my friends, and sometimes I couldn't get anything done because I wanted them to be perfect, and just like I had pictured it in my head. Eventually, I came to accepting creating something I didn't deem as perfect and lowered my own expectations drastically. And proof of that is my channel right now. I probably wouldn't have gone so far if I wanted everything to be perfect. So yeah, in order to break out of perfectionism, you just have to come to terms with not being perfect and to be content with yourself and whatever you deem good enough. But of course, you'll need to lower your expectations first. This one is way more serious than some people might think, in my opinion. This being cowardice. People might just think that it's just avoiding stuff, and for the most part, that's true. However, it goes deeper than that. Cowardice comes from a lack of confidence at its core, meaning people will avoid situations or obstacles they don't think they can handle. But it also means not doing anything. In a way, stop living life. Simply doing nothing. And like I've said before, and will say many more times in the future, doing nothing can be comfortable until this doing nothing does more damage than doing anything would. This, of course, is massively because of fears. So, if you want to break out of this, you have to understand your fear, what holds you back, and try your best to overcome it. And then simply taking small steps into rebuilding confidence. But as simple as it might seem, it's a difficult process. But you have to remember, just keep moving. Moving on, we got one of the seven deadly sins. This one being greed. Now, most people know greed is the crazy desire to have health or just material goods in general. These people are scary. They are willing to sacrifice anything and even themselves just for an extra penny to their collection. Greed is a really hard trait to lose, but we can start by being humble and appreciating what we already have, focusing on personal growth instead of material one. But there's a reason it's considered sin, so think of that what you will. Next, we got the exact opposite of self-awareness, which is simply the lack of it. You can pretty much just take what I said in the section about self-awareness and flip it on its head. These people can't reflect on themselves, they have difficulty identifying emotions, and have no idea the impact they can have on other people. So yeah, pretty much just opposite to self-awareness. I won't be repeating myself. And what I just did back there was me being stubborn, which fits right into our next trait, which is stubbornness. This is one of the worst ones, as being stubborn implies sticking to your own opinions and beliefs, even when they are wrong and we get proven they are wrong. They will reject feedback or really anything that goes against them, and they just won't change for the life of them. It can be really infuriating, especially since you see them repeat the same mistakes over, and over again. Just simply having some self awareness can help us realize how difficult we are, and maybe try our best to change. Second to last, we got judgmental. This trait is when someone judges and makes assumptions on someone with usually very limited information. This can either be new people or maybe an old friend we've grown away from. Judgmental people usually don't give people a chance and treat them unfairly and harshly, with them often showing a lack of empathy or acting superior to said person. And really, the faces you get when you're being judged. Like, you know that pressure is really heavy. There's no need to make such a scary face. That's not how you treat someone. Anyways, to avoid being so judgmental, we can practice being more open minded and give people one or two chances instead of jumping the gun and assuming something. We should also avoid stereotyping and being biased, as this has massive influence. And finally, to finish the negative traits, we have what is probably the worst one. That's right, we're gonna be talking about narcissism. The thing that's so bad about this one is that it takes from many other negative traits and mixes them into one. Narcissistic people will feel like they're always superior and over exaggerate their achievements. They feel like they are entitled to do anything and that other people should work to serve them and meet their needs without even having any drop of empathy for them. They will exploit their relationships and won't take any type of criticism from anyone about anything. However, what's ironic is that they usually have such fragile self esteem and are always looking for validation. It's not hard to piece why this is so problematic, and honestly, the only way to break out of being a narcissist is to take notes from every tip I've given. You need to quite literally start your mindset from zero. But that's asking a lot from a narcissistic person. Anyways, that's finally it for the negative traits, and wow, was this a lot. I really hope you enjoyed and learned something about yourself. But before the video ends, there's a special section coming up. So while I was making this video, I decided to ask my friends on what they thought was the best and worst trait someone can have, and the reasoning behind it. I'm going to be putting them up on screen for a second so you can read them out, but I just find it so interesting, all the different ways people think about this, and it's a really fun and interesting topic to talk about in my opinion. Anyways, here they are. So this is obviously about a narcissistic person. As you can see, these people are not liked in the slightest. I honestly think this might have been an overreaction, but again, this is his personal experience and I have no way of knowing how bad that person actually is. So for this one, what he essentially means is a calm person, which literally is someone who can keep level-headed no matter the situation. However, I find it interesting how he thinks that a bad trait needs to be something that's conscious, something that the person actively knows what they're doing is wrong, And the example he gives for this is someone who's a manipulator and is aware of that, and that it's recognizable by the person and makes them feel bad. Anyways, I wonder what other wonderful responses we have here. Oh, yeah, no, maybe this was a mistake. Anyways, these were all very interesting responses. Sure, we got some repeated ones, namely narcissism, but everyone had different reasons behind it. But even then, one of my friends couldn't even respond to this. And the reason I bring this up is because he made the point that independently of a person's trait, they can both achieve the same if they work for it. And that no trait is truly better or more important than another one. I've repeated this several times, but this just goes to show how different people interpret different things. And what this really is about perspective, which is definitely something I want to make a video about, but that's for the future. This was my personal favorite video to work on. I just had so much fun writing the script for it, learning about other people's opinion, and ultimately, I got to learn a bit about myself making it. I really hope you enjoyed this video too, and maybe you learned a bit more about yourself and the people around you. Anyways, for today's song recommendation, we got Honestly by Torrance. This one actually relates to the video, kind of, and I really like the message behind it. Well, that's it for this week, and see you next time.